You're with the Stop. Yes. You're with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. This is the fourth Tuesday of the month, which means that it is time for our data-driven policing group to meet. My name is Tiff. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm one of the facilitators of this group, along with Hamid and also Matios, Ni, Shakir. We have a bunch of folks helping out in different ways. In some of our working groups, we have a lot of different working groups connected to this fight, and folks are also welcome to join any of those as well and contact us for more information on those. Thank you for that, Matios. So also, we'll let you know about the other Tuesday night groups that we have going on, or Tuesday night meetings that are open to folks. So on the first Tuesday of the month, that is our meeting for our group around gender and sexuality and the way that folks are surveilled through those lenses. On the second Tuesday of the month, that is our fight against the ongoing war against youth. And then the third Tuesday is our general coalition meeting, and folks are welcome to join any of those as well. So that's just kind of an overview about who we are. Please do use the chat today as you like. It should be open to folks. So definitely, if that's a way that you would like to communicate, or else please definitely raise your hand. I think also probably mics are open. I'm not sure, but let us know however you'd like to participate. And we're glad that everyone is tuning in to join us. So as far as the agenda today, we are going to be talking about the architecture of surveillance. So we're going to be sharing some of what we at the coalition have been uncovering about the architecture of surveillance, which of course is ever expanding. So we're going to be talking about some of those recent updates to LAPD's architecture surveillance, some of the things we're learning, and also inviting folks to be joining us in that working group and in that uncovering. And then we're going to be handing it over to Peter as well. We're really excited to be talking with Peter about the records management system. So really looking forward to that conversation. And then we're also going to be talking towards the end with Akil, facilitating a conversation around the overturning of Roe versus Wade and what this, continued denial of folks' rights, which has been going on for a very long time. This is nothing new, but just this further escalation. What that means, through the lens of the stalker state and what we anticipate with this new development, and also what is the coalition's contribution to that conversation as folks are having these conversations about the way that people's rights are being stripped away and who that happens to. So that is the agenda for today. And I think I'll pause and see if we have any questions or anything to add. Or did I forget anything with the housekeeping? I think we're right on. Okay. All right, folks, thanks so much for joining us. We are just getting started in our conversation about the architecture of surveillance. So before we jump into looking at some slides, which I do have some slides for us to take a look at, I just wanted to kind of start by opening up the conversation to us, just checking in to see like what comes up for folks when we use that term architecture of surveillance. So when we're talking about LAPD's surveillance and that architecture, is there anything that comes up for folks? And that could be like a type of technology. It might be an experience. It might be just a word. If folks want to either share or just use the chat as well. So just like, what are we even talking about when we say that? Folks are like, I just came to listen. The stalker state, that's right. Yep. Yeah, so what we're talking about, of course, is, again, I think it has a lot of different implications for different folks. Palantir, yep. Not just weaponry, but built into the world around us. Yeah. conquest and occupation. Drawing crime maps and boundary lines. Yeah, and containment. Yeah, those are a lot of good answers. Okay, and of course, yeah, when we're talking about the stalker state, or I'm sorry, when we're talking about the architecture of surveillance, with the coalition, our focus is mainly on LAPD's architecture, but of course, it's more than that, because it's about all of those different systems and the different ways that the community is surveilled. And so, of course, there's going to be different types of overlapping agencies that are spying on community in that way. Thank you for sharing that, Matios. So that is, but yeah, we can take a look now at the diagram that the coalition has used. Okay, one moment. Okay. All right. Yeah, so here we're looking at the diagram that the coalition has used for a long time for outreach, when we were first learning about the architecture of surveillance and what makes that up, and how to start thinking about that as something that is really connected, something that these are different types of technology, different types of devices that are picking up information about people. And as we look at some of the things on here, so it's not just, some of these are data capturing devices or cameras like technology, and then some of them are also types of data capturing systems or processes or forms that are in place as well. And we're starting with this view because this is what we are continuing to learn about and to build upon. And if we go to the next, there we go. If we go to the next slide, one of the things that we understand as well, of course, is that when people's information is captured, that it not just is being held in LAPD databases, but it is also being shared in this broader information sharing environment, what we call the stalker state. So these are all of the agencies that have access to that information as well. Okay. And then in terms of, before we get into talking about like some of the different ways that that this architecture has been expanding and some of the different updates, I also just wanted to kind of pause and have us think about like, what is the context in which this happens? So what is the political climate in which we are seeing these developments? And here are just like a few of the recent additions to LAPD's architecture of surveillance. So for instance, and these are just some of the things. This is not everything that's been added. For instance, in October of 2020, we see that LAPD got a donation of recording devices for their helicopter fleet, which 10 helicopters, I believe, is about half of their fleet, so that they could start retaining footage from events. So they already had the capability when they are over large protests, large events of any kind, to be live streaming video footage to different locations. But what they secured in October was the capability that they could start actually capturing that information and retaining it indefinitely. In December of 2020, we saw a lot of different changes being made. There were a number of policies that were put out and laid down. For instance, they introduced a policy for ALPRs, which is automatic license plate readers. This is something they've been using since 2004, but they decided in 2020 that they would introduce a policy for that. Again, with facial recognition technology, this is something that wasn't new to LAPD and what they were doing, but they decided that at that time they would introduce a policy. And they also expanded their policy for the use of drones. Then in June of this year, we also see how they are increasing their surveillance over social media, and receiving a donation of the Scope Now subscription. and receiving, I believe, one of their requests following the protest, the uprising in 2020, was to get more funding for social media surveillance and analysis of that information. And that is something that they're getting funding for. So I just wanted to pause for a moment. It's a little off-putting that I can't see folks, but wish I could work my Zoom better. But yeah, I just wanted to pause and ask folks, like, as we are thinking about the expansion of the architecture of surveillance, like, what is that political climate, or what are some of the circumstances or trends, and perhaps even historically, that we tend to see expansion of surveillance? Like, what are some of the excuses for this? I'll just pause and see if folks have any thoughts on this.
There's a hand up from Audrey.
Hi. I just always think one of the most disheartening things is that I really believe that still there's a huge segment of the population that thinks that this makes them safer.
Yeah, agree with that as well. Thank you, Audrey. And we see some comments in the chat here: to protect us from Osama bin Laden. Yeah. Even though he's already dead. And if you're not doing something wrong, you have nothing to hide. Rhetoric. Yes. Yeah, and some additional things. Oh, and I see Elliot also. This may sound petty. I spent a lot of time in Facebook jail. The reason for that is not because I offended and you may want to, please also, folks, comment out loud if it's easier for you. Spent a lot of time in Facebook jail. There's a reason for that. And it's not because I offended a person, I offended an algorithm. Yeah. Yeah, and something else that that we've been talking about in our community policing work group also is how we see this crackdown and this addition of surveillance and this expansion of surveillance being done under the guise of, or being done actually following an uprising. So following protest, you know, instead of when we have these massive uprisings and protests, what we see, instead of the state actually responding to what was the fundamental underlying reason for that uprising and kind of addressing those needs that folks have, instead we see them kind of cracking down and saying, okay, well, what we'll do is we will respond to it in this way. And one of those is to increase surveillance and to essentially end up criminalizing protests and stifling protests as well. So those are some of the things. And then also, just the other thing I wanted to point out on this slide is we see also just them. I don't know if they think about it this far in advance, but it seems to be very much just setting up to be having that further expansion. The fact that they're like rolling out these policies at certain times, like they had that policy for ALPRs in place. They put in that policy for, excuse me, facial recognition tech. Just always, so all of this is very much done as well under this guise of like, oh, but we have this policy, we went through this process, we put it through the police commission, all of it kind of being done in the right way, which may possibly be setting them up for these further expansions of the technology. So yeah, so those are just some of the thoughts there. So now we'll get into some of the tech updates. Okay. I love the art that Nee has added to this. Thank you. So yeah, so one of the ones that we wanted to look at and just touch on is the LAPD's drone program. This is something that there hasn't been anything new like super recently, but we're very much kind of tracking it because we're seeing how this is expanding. And we also understand drones to be, you know, these weapons, these devices that have there's a lot of potential for that to continue expanding. So right now, LAPD is essentially positioning drones as that they are to be like gathering information, and they are like taking the place of a cop in the community to be acting in certain ways. But of course, what we understand is that increasingly drones are looked to be kind of intervening with people as well, potentially to be, you know, adding some kind of weaponry to them or different devices. So as far as just looking at the like LAPD's drone program and kind of thinking about the way that that is changing and expanding over time, I'd love to get people's thoughts on this as well, or anything that we might have left out or could possibly be thinking about. So essentially, if folks remember, it started in their program officially began in 2017 when they started a 6-month pilot program that was just being used by drones were just being used for SWAT by SWAT division for like a certain set of circumstances. Since then, it's been expanded, and that was, of course, very much against the wishes of the community. Since then, it's been expanded to different divisions. So it was expanded to hazmat pretty immediately. And then in 2020, December as well, it was expanded to traffic division, which is a pretty big move to now be saying, oh, this thing that we said was super specific only to be used by SWAT is now going to be also used by traffic division to be like essentially to be taking surveillance over any large traffic events that may happen. That's a pretty big shift. So they also expanded the different types of situations that they could use that in. They kind of increased that list. So that now being used to, I think, also deliver warrants, to search a perimeter of an area for surveillance of traffic events. And they also have increased the number of drones that they have. And it would be really great to take a closer look at all of the different ones that they have added. I believe they may have about 7. I'm not sure. And I'm not sure if anyone else has better information on that. But they do have additional drones, and they have different capabilities. The one that we're reading about here on this slide, the Brink Lemure, has a window breacher, so that has a propeller. It can be used for indoors. And then there was an additional drone added there that I don't have any information about that one. And then just recently, I think this month, they added a type of mapping software. That is something they donated to their traffic division so that they could be taking, and this is something, it's a software that is used by different police departments to essentially take an aerial view of an area and to kind of get a geomap of the area and add data points to it. And so that is something that LAPD got supposedly to be used by their traffic division by the drones there. So yeah, I'll just pause and see if folks have thoughts or any questions on that, or again, like any thoughts about like where we see that headed, or anything you'd want to know more about any of these.
Sorry if I missed it, Tiff, but when did the expansion of use for drones for traffic start? I know it's piloted, it seems like it was piloted in 2017, but when did it expand?
Yeah, thank you for that. I believe that, and I wrote that down somewhere. I believe that was in December of 2020, which is when they made a lot of changes to their surveillance.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good, it is a really, I mean, that is a very concerning, like I'm sure folks agree, that's a really concerning shift, and would be interested to learn more about what they're doing with that. Ray, I see your hand.
Yeah, so well, thanks for this presentation. It's awesome. Good to be updated. So drones are pretty interesting. It's very easy to combine the imagery from drones, since they're highly maneuverable and they can operate at different altitudes, and the images can be used at different scopes. Facial recognition can be used on these things. So apart from traffic division, I'm thinking we don't know what, when, and where they can be expanded. So they could be used in criminal investigations or something like that, and or just general surveillance operations. And I don't know what kind of policies would prevent such a thing from happening, but when you combine facial recognition or particular kinds of algorithms, I'll call it, but deep learning, you can look at the images that are being captured from these drones, and then you can categorize those images, and then into like a car or a particular kind of car or a person or a particular person. You can run it off of other databases depending on what kind of back-end computer power you have. So the capabilities of these things is pretty. It will acquire intelligence in an operational sense pretty easily. So yeah, that's something different than traffic division, what's happening now, and from the expansion from these specialized cases to a very general traffic division, widespread geographic area use. The next step would be to combine this with databases that we saw earlier, and just combine things that we already know of. And I pass.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ray. Yeah, those are those are great. Those are great comments. Yeah, you're exactly right on. And to answer, well, yeah, to respond to a comment, you talked about like facial recognition could be used with those. And I just want to say like, absolutely, because part of like when they introduced this policy in 2017, they, part of that was in the room, there was like this conversation. And so, and you can find that policy, that LAPD policy online, like their drone policy. And we have a copy of that, of course. But essentially in the room, they were talking about like, this will never be used with facial recognition. They will never be armed with or like used with like have facial recognition on them. And then also he then added like also not be used with facial recognition software, but that isn't actually anywhere written in the policy. It was kind of verbally said. And also like at the time, like Charlie Beck, who was the police chief at the time, he was like asked about like, could you not, like, what did you think of us adding this? And he said, well, yeah, he said, of course we could use it with facial recognition, but if you're saying that you don't want that, we just simply won't do it. And so I think my point is that, yes, like that was a conversation, but it's like, yeah, I mean, it could definitely be used that way. And kind of what we understand about databases and the way that images get uploaded, that information gets shared, there really would be nothing preventing that.
If I may follow up, these ideas that I'm coming up with I'm just getting from, well, number one, my research into data science and using images for these purposes, not necessarily for surveillance purposes, but for detecting objects. But I can just think of several military movies, or even the federal intelligence agencies, which are using these drones for exactly that same thing. The question is even if the police department is not using it in that manner, they're connected to the databases and the images. If they're being saved, the algorithms, or at least the computer programs used to do that, can easily be transferred to the intelligence agencies, or the FBI or other kinds of or NSA to do exactly that. I pass.
Yeah, Hamid, please.
Yeah, no, thank you. This is really a good conversation. I mean, I think a couple of things that I just wanted to lift up, obviously, as you're talking about it, that how, I mean, the history behind the drones goes back to 2014. That's when the first time LAPD received these two drones back from the Seattle PD in May of 2014, and they received them as a gift. So that's when we immediately launched that fight and were able to keep the drones grounded. And as was stated, that then they came back in 2017, and in October 2017, then they approved after very huge community rejection. And then the official 6-month pilot program started in July of 2018 for 6 months, and then that became permanent as a result of that as well, where because they started crafting the policies and all of that. So I think, so just between that window of what we had kept on saying about mission creep, that the operation is going to expand tremendously. So we see that going all the way from the initial, in 2019, they used the drone only 3 times. Apparently, that's what they reported at least. And, they lie. But this was under special circumstances for hostage situation, and someone who was using a gun in an apartment complex. The point I'm trying to get to is that about this facial recognition, and to your point, Ray, that they did say that, well, we're not going to install real-time facial recognition, but then when they were challenged about about all the data and the footage that they're going to capture and deploying that through LACRIS and other things as well, that's one thing. But I think I don't want us to forget that the whole culture of deputization is huge in our society, in this society as well. So every time we go to protests, even if the LAPD, and now obviously they're adding it in their broader expansion of protest coverages as well, so that's out the window too. But we also need to see that how many people are using drones out there who are creating or capturing all the images, which are then available for the LAPD. And if people think that they're not, I think we'll be fooling ourselves, because we have that clear example of and absolutely, thank you, Desiree, universities and all of that, how in the 2020 uprising, the LAPD went around in the neighborhoods and talked to Ring Technologies, and they were able to get all the footage on Ring to specifically identify BLM protesters. So in a sense, it's not what their policy is, because, fuck their policy, because we don't want them to have any policy, and they do. We just want to dismantle this thing, because no policy is going to stop this. But I think the question is that for us to really explore the sheer scale of information sharing that happens. And, last thing I would say is that Tiff was talking about the stalker state. So I think how many people are there ready, at a moment's notice to be, I guess, more loyal than the king, and to provide all the information that they have to law enforcement and everything, which is going to play out with all the abortion bans and all of that. And that's what was instituted in the Texas ban about see something, say something, behavioral surveillance. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just looking in the chat as well. Shakir, I see you. Why is my chat box so small? Reminding us that it, I can't see the whole thing. Yeah, please go ahead, Shakir.
Yeah, I was saying, on the topic of the facial recognition and the policy around body cams, is that there is currently a state law. It's kind of one of the only restrictions both on facial recognition and on body cams in California. But I believe that it's about to expire, and they have not been able to renew it, last I heard. So, that's an example, I think, both of when these technologies are first introduced, like piece by piece, they're often either, in an informal way, they say, okay, we're just, there's always limitations. and those limitations obviously kind of go away with mission creep, but even the formal ones, even when there's a specific, like no matter how strict state law that bans something, once the technology is introduced, it's not going anywhere, and the laws can easily be changed. And so that's kind of what you see with the dismantling, and that even, you know, and Hamid was just saying, like, that's why we don't want a policy. That's a part of it, is that, yeah, like once something is there, policies are words that can either be violated or just reformulated, and that's and you can't do anything about that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then Dejanay, I see you. Yeah, regarding who is, I assume this is in regard to who is gathering that information as well. And universities, in my institution alone, the geography department does regular drone coverage as well, and can be a point in the academic complicity piece. Yeah, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that, Dejanay.
Well, just that the drone coverage that I know of, in the department I'm in, who this department already has connections with the CIA, and I've pushed back on that. So that's a point, but they usually are saying that they're doing drone coverage in areas such as like field areas for like the more sort of like geological piece and like the landscape. So thinking about the natural landscape, but obviously they aren't able to always, they're doing that stuff regularly in Palos Verdes, I know of, and in parts of like Central California. I have to figure out where, but you know, that could be just thinking about where that's happening that I know of, just at Long Beach State. And obviously there are their geography departments at Santa Barbara and UCLA, and the field of geography is heavily involved, if not, you know, funded also by the state for things around defense and war and things like that. So that the span of like that coverage and use of those methods are happening across the state, and definitely in different areas in SoCal through various universities. So just want to mention that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and I hadn't considered it that way in terms of like what other information would LAPD be tapping into or gathering, or yeah, like those other sources of information, or just openly collaborating with. So yeah, that's a really good place for us to be looking as well. Okay, any other, yeah, along with campus, please. Yeah. Yeah, and also I'll just say that as we're talking about all of this, we also welcome folks to join us in kind of doing this research work as well, because folks are just raising a lot of really great questions. And I know that we do want to continue our research on this, and this is super helpful as well. So just really appreciate the information and questions that folks are raising, and definitely let us know if you want to be a part of that research or conversations around this. Any other questions or comments on the drone piece? Okay. All right, we'll move on to, okay, so I wanted to talk about ALPRs as well. So ALPRs, of course, are, well, automatic license plate readers. They sometimes just call them LPRs. So license plate reader technology sounds super basic, you know, been used for a long time. LAPD has used them since at least 2004. And they always make them sound, you know, like, oh, these are just devices that are being put up in communities and they're just scanning license plates. We take that information on the license plate and then we compare it to a hot list. Like so-called hot list of like stolen cars. And so even to this day, LAPD will say that this is the main reason that license plate reader technology is being used. So we want to talk, thank you. I see our volunteer, Blue Wombat, thank you. So we want to talk more about like what is going on with ALPRs, how are they being used, and just talking a little bit more about them. And again, I would love to hear feedback from folks about like questions or thoughts, concerns. Where do we see this going? So because it is expanding very much. So as far as like the license plate reader devices, and I'm not sure how familiar folks are with them. Folks may have much better information than I do about it, but essentially it's like it can be a fixed device. It can also be added to like CCTV technology. I'm sorry, it can be added to like CCTV cameras, so that can pick up plate information. I think that was one of the first ways that it was used in the MacArthur Park area. And also more recently, they are added to LAPD cars. So they actually go along with the cars, they're on the dashboard or they're on the top of the car. And then even more recently, they have, I think Vigilant Solutions is one of the tech companies that has very much been selling this type of equipment and software to police. And they developed a mobile app, I think around 2015. So actually having license plate scanning technology on a mobile phone. And so that's a little bit about the technology itself. And yeah, in terms of like the type of information being gathered. So it's a person's license plate, but it's also much more than that. It's like the location, the time, and also you're getting a whole bunch of additional information in that picture, because it's not just a plate. It's also like, it's a picture kind of the car or part of the car. And they're also using these on people is what we'll find out. So on to the next. Okay, so this is, and I'm sorry, it may be a little hard to see this. So this is a picture of, this is a look at the software, I believe, and I can't remember the name of it, but this is essentially the Vigilant Solutions platform. And so this is what LAPD is going to be using now. This is part of the contract that LAPD signed with Motorola this year. So in the past, LAPD has used a number of different contractors for their license plate readers. And they've kind of done it, it's been a little bit piecemeal. And then all of that license plate reader information would be funneled into Palantir. And Palantir had an analysis platform for that license plate reader information. And that would be shared in that information sharing environment that we talked about. So in 2022, Motorola is going to take over they're going to take over and be the vendor, signed a contract for the next 5 years to be updating that technology, to be managing it, to be sharing their analysis platform. And so that's what we're looking at. And that's why we're kind of trying to learn more about like, okay, what does this mean? Let's learn more about ALPRs because they are expanding everywhere. And so essentially this is what we're looking at. And I shared this to just give us a view of like, the first thing that grabbed me about this is like, like if you see the pictures and it's a little hard to see them, but it's, I mean, it really is, it's like some of these, it looks like a picture from outside someone's house. So right away, that's, it's more information than just their plate. And then also, I believe it shows some kind of like, they do an analysis of like where, like they do an analysis of not just what is the car in that, like what is that car, but they also look at any other car in that area and any possible connections to any of those cars. So they do that kind of for the whole area. And then they also look at where has this car been in the past? And then they make predictions about where is it going to be in the future. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on there. I'll just pause for a second, see if anyone has any comments or questions on this.
I have a question about, so I can see that you have this, but who has access to this? Like,
do you mean this
screenshot?
Yeah, this is actually this is from Motorola. This is part of their marketing. I think it was
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's a good, I mean, that's a good question though, because it looks, are you saying that because it looks like it's showing us information there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So it's sort of like housed through Motorola. So it's like this privatized piece of the surveillance. And okay, I had a side thought about the drone piece and wondering how much that is being like exported, to other agencies like federal agencies, but just this is part of that, seeing how this is being housed through Motorola. So
Yeah, and I think, yeah, and this is, I should have the right name for it, but it was I mean, this is essentially the Vigilant Solutions data analysis platform that's used very widely by police. And the reason that's attached to Motorola is because in 2019, Motorola purchased Vigilant Solutions, which had been a massive,
okay,
yeah.
I see okay. So it's definitely accessed by LAPD and also Motorola.
Yeah, I mean, this is essentially, and I'm not sure if you've ever seen like screenshots of like Palantir, but I kind of, which looked quite a bit like this, but I would liken it to that in terms of like, it's essentially like a database or a place you can search where you would go in and put like up on the upper left-hand corner, you can see it's like you can put in a plate, even a partial plate number, and it'll be like, oh, these are all the locations that we've ever scanned it at. Here's all the pictures that we took of it. Here's a pattern that we can see from this activity. And then they're also able to pull up any connections that like all of the names that have ever been associated with that car. So like if someone had been stopped by police, like for a field interview, and in which case they write down all the names of all the people that are in the vehicle, like all of that would come up with it as well. So you have like every association that's ever been made to this car is like a part of that as well.
Okay. Thanks.
And then
Is there Ray? Could I make a comment
Yeah.
here?
Please go ahead.
This kind of reminds me of a study I've seen before where I don't envision how this would be connected to LAPD, but I was looking at a study of some researchers taking pictures of cars from Google Street Maps and seeing what kind of cars are in the driveways of particular neighborhoods, and then they would they would correlate those neighborhoods with political voting trends, and also it would kind of show it. That kind of correlation would be associated with a kind of car that was there. So it kind of leads me to the question of, or kind of makes my imagination flow of, I mean, what kind of person would drive a four-wheel drive lifted truck with two large flags on the back versus a lowrider in a driveway versus a Subaru Outback versus an SUV or a soccer mom van sort of thing. But that's kind of a social analysis. I don't think that the LAPD actually does that. This information seems to be restricted to government agencies. So I'm just thinking out of the box on sort of the capabilities of this kind of technology. I pass.
Yeah, and Ryan says, I recall hearing about that too. But yeah, I mean, I would think that that LAPD could certainly be capable of that type of analysis, like if they decided to, because essentially it's like, while we're looking at these images in this context of this data analysis platform, all of these images would be part of that, like they would be available to, again, that whole information sharing environment. I think that this would become part of evidence.com, which is a database that I need to learn more about, but it's essentially a database where all of this information would be stored and has been stored for a very long time. I think, again, since about 2014. So yeah, I mean, so it can certainly be taken and used pretty much in any way that they would want to kind of fit any narrative that they wanted to. So, and I think just from speaking with lawyers, we know that they do very much just take different pieces and use that to craft whatever analysis or narrative that they want. So yeah, and I see Hamid, information sharing between local, regional, federal is pretty active. LAPD is further expanding that, which I believe Peter will be talking about in his presentation of the RMS. Yes, right on. Okay, and yeah, we will keep it moving as well. So yeah, we don't need to spend too much time on this one, but essentially I think some of the things we've been talking about in our defund surveillance group as well, as we're looking at like how much money LAPD spends and all this stuff is like, is just like, how are we talking about these devices in ways that are kind of clear about what is the harm. So it's not just like, what is this technology or what is it doing, but what is the harm? And so in terms of thinking about like what happens to this data, so it is added to that, to those databases. So it's not just, you know, please say it's just scanning a plate and connecting it to a hot list, but really it's, they can scan a plate and know all of these things. So it's who it's registered to, who is that person's friends and associates, where they have been in the last 5 to 10 years, because they keep the information that long. They can predict where they're going to be in the future, where they live, any encounter that they've ever had with police or the criminal so-called justice system at any time, any plate numbers with any of those associations. So there's just a whole bunch of information that is attached to that. It's not just a plate. And then Vigilant Solution Mobile. So this, just wanted to flag that part of the contract that LAPD signed with Motorola this year does include access to, and I think it said it had access to it, or it was an optional thing, but essentially it includes unrestricted access to Vigilant's mobile application. Sorry, let me continue reading that. Mobile application for smartphones. And why that is important is because that does include, this Vigilant mobile application does include a face scan. So this is something that was part of that contract. So, which I think was kind of passed without any remark or any comment on it. So it would be good for us to find out more about, does LAPD have this? Have they been using it? Because again, this app itself is not new. I think it recently was updated to include a face scan. But essentially, so, and the way that Vigilant Solutions and Motorola positions that is, hey, you can't get the actual plate. Don't worry, you can also do a face scan by taking a picture with your phone. And that's part of the information that you're capturing as well. And I think, yeah, so this is again how they position it. And I included a picture here of the mobile companion to show this. Again, this is what their license plate shot looks like. It's really a picture of like the area. And then saying positively ID suspects and victims faster. The faster you know who, the faster the case can be resolved. So you can more quickly identify persons of interest right on the scene, capture a facial image of a person, scan a barcode, send data directly to Vigilant Face Search Gallery for confirmation or further investigation. So I think just looking at all of this, what was clear to me was like that when we're thinking about automatic license plate readers, what's really important for us to understand is that this is not just tracking plates, cars, vehicles. It is very much, it's tracking people. It's really surveillance of an entire scene, like it's surveillance of an entire location, getting all the information from that location and then adding that to the further information that LAPD has. Yeah, so I don't know if folks have any thoughts or questions on that. I know that's something we need to learn more about. I think I see a hand up. Yes, please go ahead.
I have a quick question. I was gonna ask, when it pertains to like the identification of these license plates, is this solely California? Because like, obviously there's people that drive Texas cars, Nevada cars, and how does that, affect, the, I guess, diagnosis of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. That would be, it's connected to the DMV, and it's connected to like national and federal agencies. So I think that it would not matter is the answer. I see Hamid nodding, but I believe that I've never heard anything that it would just be, within California, but that's a really great question. In fact, I think they are very proud of the fact that they work, beyond state boundaries. But if there aren't any more questions, I think we'll move on from license plate readers. But again, this is all like work in progress, and license plate readers, it's really something that just keeps getting passed quite a bit here locally, as well as in other places. And we are very much fighting back against it, because there's just a lot of terrible narratives about it. At city council when they have these conversations about it, but there's a lot of opportunity to be sharing information and pushing back on it as well. Which we're excited about. But I'll keep it moving then. Okay, so here I'll just say that Mohammed says law enforcement information exchange systems, several information gathering, storing, and sharing systems. Yes. So just saying here that, when LAPD says, oh, these are just picking up plates, and we want to be very specific that no, they do target specific areas. So this is from 2017. We see here on a mission sheet, part of their daily mission in Boyle Heights was to go and scan these specific areas that are highlighted in green. LPR, go and scan every single plate in that area and get information on that, which is an extremely targeted type of surveillance. So that was 2017. And then looking at this is a map that we created based on someone filed a PRA that was not in the coalition, but it was online, a PRA asking for LAPD ALPR scans. So the location and date and time of every scan within a 1 week period. And one of our comrades, Chris, mapped what is the location of those scans, which is very interesting information as well. So in one day, it was May 17th, 2021, which I don't know if that's a remarkable day or not, but this was the location of all of those scans, which again is very interesting because it's clearly very targeted. Okay, and then I'll just touch on scope now. Yeah, because I do want to keep it moving. It's nearly 7 o'clock, but scope now. So we have talked a lot about recently, we have talked a lot, done some webinars about social media surveillance, but essentially just wanted to note that with scope now, so this is a data analysis software, data analysis platform. LAPD has used it in the past, and essentially they pride themselves on being very good at gathering any type of online information, having access to just all of that information and then gathering it and doing a data analysis of it and then packaging it in such a way that it is like court ready or kind of ready for prosecution. So really a great example of like how they're saying like kind of legitimizing that analysis just by the fact that they're saying, oh, well, we've gathered all of this information, we've put it together and we've packaged it for you for court. They have used it in the past on a trial basis. And then just this month, they got a donation to the threat management unit. And I think the threat management unit, what did they do? Okay, so I think the threat management unit, that is a specific group that looks at workplace violence and stalking. And what is kind of remarkable about Scope Now that I just thought was really interesting. I mean, one thing right away is that it does include the capacity for facial recognition. It does include a tool that uses facial recognition software, whereby it, if you are using a photo, it will compare that with all of the images that it finds online in all of these online sources, which again is something that LAPD does have a policy against. So when they acquired this technology, they said, oh, we will not ever use that tool. So that's one way it's remarkable. Another way is, let me see. Sorry, I'm gonna try to, wait. Okay, I'm gonna switch my tabs here if I can. Okay, so this is, some of what, I really have trouble moving stuff around on my screen. Okay, so this is some of what Scope Now does, and this is information that was found through the Brennan Institute. So we can see that they engage in, like, let's see, how we help is what they say. This is information that came from Scope Now. This is telling us some of what they do. So they're saying that they do that analysis, court ready. They generate heat maps. Subjects can be hard to find. They may move around. We merge location data to provide an interactive date and frequency. Customers use the heat map to track somebody's movements. So that's one of the things they do. They use behavioral analytics to make predictions about people. They can identify supposedly key behaviors like violence, gun usage, drug paraphernalia. So essentially technology that would be searching through all of these images for things that the system is, or the user, in this case, the LAPD, is telling it, these are things that we associate with those things. So look for these things in that information that you're gathering. So they do kind of searches and analysis, so-called analysis of behavior based on that. And then they do like monitoring of people as well, associate linking. They use 30 different attributes to establish connections between parties. So those are like some of the things they do. So yeah, again, and I would love to hear if folks have any thoughts on that, but just at the time that it was donated, it seemed very much that this is the type of thing that is used to kind of try to make predictions about people, to be kind of assessing people for risk, and making guesses or predictions about who is going to be engaging in a certain type of behavior in the future, kind of based on all of this information that they're gathering about people. So yeah, so we're looking forward to learning more about that. Okay, and I'll switch back to, all right. Okay. All right, and then the last one I'll just touch on before we switch over to Peter and hear more about the records management system is just naming that with all of this, some of the things that we're wanting to learn more about and we are very much tracking is the facial recognition that LAPD is using, because as we've already named in just some of these things that we've just talked about, they very, like, again, performatively established a policy in January of 2021 saying that they would only ever use facial recognition through the sheriff's mugshot database. So they said that they would only use it in the way that that is used, which is by comparing images that LAPD might get and then comparing it to images that the sheriff has in their massive database of millions of pictures. But as we've already seen just in this conversation, they have a subscription to Scope Now, which has that capability. The Vigilant Solutions mobile app has that capability. And then additional contracts with Motorola and Axon also include products that have facial recognition as part of their capabilities. So just naming that as well is something that we really want to be staying on top of. And I'll just check our chat over here. Yeah, Akil, I don't know if you're able to comment, but I was thinking that very much as well, like who Scope Now is used on. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. This is my first time hearing about it. So, but it sounds really similar.
Yeah, I think that would be really great for us to learn more about. in terms of just, yeah, how it's being used and on whom and what capacity. But I think that was everything that I had, and I don't think I see any other hands. So I think at this point, we will hand it over to Peter. I will stop sharing. And yeah, so that was an overview of some of the stuff we're looking at with the architecture surveillance. There's a lot more, and yeah, a lot more to find out and for us to be pushing back on. And we're also looking at like how much money this is taking from the budget, where this money is coming from, who is supporting this and collaborating in this. So just a lot of stuff going on there, and we'd love to have folks join us in that work. So definitely let us know if you're interested in kind of any part of that. But now, yes, thank you. So now I'll pass it on to Peter, who's going to talk more about part of that architecture surveillance, which is the records management system. So here you go, Peter.
Yeah, hey everyone. My name is Peter. He, him pronouns are fine. Thanks, Tiff, so much for the overview. I know that for everybody on here, this is a lot to make sense of. There's a lot of moving pieces. And it turns out that it's a lot of moving pieces for the police too. And that's kind of the point of this record management system, is to kind of bring all these pieces together. So let me bring up these slides here. So everybody can see this. So records management system is what it sounds like. It's a system for managing records. So what are the records that we're talking about here? These are police records. So we have all these police records from like the history of the LEPD. All these records can be digitized and put into databases. And basically the job of this system is to make all of those records accessible to the police so that basically they can search them. So that's kind of the boring explanation of what a records management system is. But it kind of goes a little bit further than that when we're looking at this Motorola system. So, you know, we talked about Palantir coming to mind when we're talking about state surveillance. So this is kind of the new corporate environment of surveillance that's kind of replacing Palantir, at least for the LEPD. So we have Motorola here, we have Microsoft, we have Axon making body cams. And basically the job of this record management system is to bring all of these different elements together, all the data that they're collecting, all the software systems that they're using, all the methods of collecting information, and put them in one environment to basically streamline the entire process. But we're going to kind of break this down and figure out actually like what's going on there. So the records management system is really a way of uniting all these databases. So this is definitely like the meme of the year, like as everybody's putting together all this information. This is just looking at different records of what kind of databases the LEPD is trying to link together with their records management system. So you can actually go to this link here to look at that and interact with it. But yeah, basically at minimum, the system just wants to take all these different databases from different places, including from the DMV, and including from state, federal levels, local levels, and put them all in one place. And what that allows the police to do is basically to search for all these records. And one thing that these systems advertise, one thing that Motorola advertises, is being able to use machine learning to give recommendations for searches. So, you know, like if you use Google, Google will give you some recommendations based on other searches. You know, if you use like YouTube or Amazon, all these systems have algorithms for recommending content to you. So this is really no different. Just the content that's being recommended by the system is coming from existing police data. So pulling from all these million entries of police data and helping police kind of search for people. If there's a typo that police put in a database, the system will help them fix that typo, which sounds really mundane, but you can also imagine how that would, you know, lead to certain names coming up in the system instead of other ones. They also advertise the idea of having assisted narratives. So basically crime analysts and law enforcement officers are always trying to develop crime narratives about whatever circumstances. And so the system is supposed to aid in that process to give recommendations for how that narrative could be created. So if they're kind of putting the pieces together, the system is supposed to, you know, recommend different pieces that could be included. And another thing that the system does is it's a mapping system. So when you have all this data together, you also want to be able to show it basically and make it usable. So the police are using this for pretty much every aspect of like investigations and like dispatch. So a lot of what's sold here is when the police get a call and then they go to respond to an incident, this system will retrieve all of the relevant, potentially relevant data that's relevant to that incident, that's relevant to that location, it's relevant to the vehicles in question, and put it like all on the screen. And also give kind of video feeds in real time that might be related to that area. So again, integrating all this data together into one place for what they're calling situational awareness. But also does more, and that's really something that they advertise as kind of making the system more secure, which is just control over the information. So this is a system for making it easier to have forms, making it easier to collect information from criminal suspects. One way that they do that is through something called field interview cards. These forms also will try to like automatically fill some details, or they'll recommend details that need to be filled out. And another thing that this does is it kind of makes the process of collaborating with different stakeholders more like effective for the police. So if there's somebody that is trying to keep certain houseless people off of their property, the system will make it easier for the police to report on these people, and then whatever people own this property to give updates to that case. So there's kind of like a back and forth communication between the system and other stakeholders. So it's not only the police using it, the police are really the ones that have access, but they're also kind of producing these reports that will get used by other stakeholders. And then another thing that Motorola is really trying to sell is that they are trying to connect lots of different devices together. So of course, officers will have like smartphones. These smartphones will give them maps, information like that. They also want to give them kind of real-time alerts for things that are going on. So maybe there will be like some automatic detection of a shot being fired, or an automatic detection of somebody who has a certain license plate that's associated with another criminal moving to a certain place. They want to send these kind of automated alerts to officers in real time. And also they want to be able to share these events more easily. And yeah, another part of that is kind of developing this Internet of Things technology, where they want to have Axon tasers, Axon body cams, networked bulletproof vests, all in the same system, so that if something happens to any of them, somebody will get an alert about it, and then they'll know what's happening. So it's trying to get as much granular information as possible about everything that's happening at all times for responding to incidents. So actually, if you look at the system, there's these kind of multiple stages that you go through, where really it's trying to update like every aspect of policing. And this includes crowdsourcing information from the community. So trying to create more community dashboards, kind of like, what's that thing called? Like citizen app, something like that, where people can more easily report, supposedly, I'm not sure exactly the details, or just get information about what's happening. Handling dispatches, having maps. Yeah, maps, CAD means computer-aided dispatch. So helping police get to certain incidents and like mapping that. I can't read this because y'all's faces are in the way, but you get the idea. It's involved in a lot of different things, and also involved in jail management systems. So court management systems and jail management systems are also integrated into the system. And basically what you have is, I'll kind of skip ahead, what we could call like a data to inmate pipeline, where going down this pipeline, you have this data that's collected from citizens, from 911 calls, that sends police out, that analyzes the data, and then eventually goes all the way to jail management. So kind of one way of thinking about this, some language that we're using, is lubricating this process of criminalization. So taking a lot of data and making it simpler to share, making it simpler to analyze, and basically putting people in jail, and having some pretty tight control over their lives from the moment the data is collected to the moment that they're released from prison, and then even after that, right? So sorry for all of these parentheses and quotation marks, but yeah, basically this system is just, what it's doing is it's taking all this crime data as raw material to construct crime narratives as effectively as possible. And we know that if you have enough data, millions of data points, the connections that you can make become more and more. And if you really scrutinize that data hard enough, it's possible to prove anything. So part of what the system is used for is creating crime narratives and then trying to send them to other people, other whatever officers, leading officers, to prove basically that there's something going on. And this just gives like more control over the narrative. We know, for example, using body cams, that body cams really help legitimize whatever the police are doing in any circumstance. Even if there's police violence, right, they can use the body cam after the fact to prove that they weren't at fault. And this is because basically the more information the police have at their disposal, also that they're controlling, the more they can manipulate it in different ways to control the narrative. And this just gives them more power to do that. And then really one thing that we have to keep an eye on is that the system is not just for like searching data, but it's also for sending out real-time alerts to officers so they can be, quote, on the lookout. So going back to this Internet of Things of shots fired, vest pierce, officer down, they want to have real-time information about that. I think that is pretty much it. Yeah, even here they have really explicitly that this is advertised to help officers build a stronger case. Like, yeah, they're really direct about that. Like, this system will help you build stronger cases, collect more data to build stronger cases. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So if anybody has any questions or comments, please say out loud.
Chat.
You probably have
Yeah.
more, yeah.
The questions in chat, Peter, from Dejanay just asked.
So I don't know exactly which cities are using this platform now, but it's an already existing platform. They have like Motorola Command Central and Motorola Premier One. And these platforms are already developed. So I don't know the exact information about which departments are using them, but they're definitely being used. And as we know, the LAPD is already using some Motorola technology, right? So this is just kind of a way of integrating it all together. Yeah.
Yeah, one quick thing, if I could add to that also, Dejanay, that this goes back to where so there was a system in place for the last about 50 plus years that the FBI had developed, which was called Uniform Crime Reporting System. But Uniform Crime Reporting System was like most of the major police departments and quite a few other police departments would be reporting. But that was more like not like every crime would be reported, but some of the things that would go in, they would also, and it was based on trends as well. But then the FBI came back in 2017 or 18 or 16, something like that, more recently, where they changed that to the National Incident-Based Reporting System. And in that, they specified 52 or 55 different categories, including everything from homicide to property crime to burglaries to everything else. And that's what really kind of led to the expansion of record management systems. And we may have heard that, for example, NYPD stopped using Palantir. Well, they didn't stop using Palantir just because they didn't like Palantir. They just kind of created their own in-house capacity and expanded that capacity as well. And then they just moved into, so the LAPD just started, and the National Incident-Based Report System. And I think, Peter, when you showed that first chart of various corporations, I think the NIBRS is even mentioned into that as well. There were all of those logo. Yeah, if you look at the bottom, the NIBRS. So that basically goes into where so the LAPD started expanding their capacity with about $4 or $5 million going back in 2017 or 18 or something, and then this year they're expanding it more by another $5 or $6 million. So the record management systems is really kind of just pulling Palantir, setting it aside and expanding it. I think the question or the one comment that I do have is, and as I've always listened to this thing, I always go back to immediately in the aftermath of the Patriot Act. And if people were around then or active, like may have heard of the name John Ashcroft. And John Ashcroft was the Attorney General at the time when 9/11 happened. And one of his big wish was to create what they call TIA, the Total Information Awareness System, which coincidentally, even after the height of everything else that was going on, when he started talking about it, Congress basically stepped in and they denied funding for that massive information environment to be established. So, not to take too much time, but, how piecemeal these things have developed and evolved. And I would even say that more than the wish for the police departments, if you look at the private side of it, the private sector, how they have kind of garnished this thing and kind of created this whole environment with new products and fancy products. But my question really to you is, Peter, and you've been studying these things, that there's a whole lot of show and tell. Right? There's a whole lot of fucking show and tell that we see constantly. And it's almost like a science fiction movie at times, because when we think about it, whether you're walking, whether you're driving, whether you're in the park, whether you're on your computer, whether on your phone, whether you're shitting or do whatever, constantly information is being shared. So now the question is that, and I don't want to go down the track like, it's all bullshit, because it's not. Because to us, it's very clear that from a race point of view, it's about assigning criminality, right? So who gets that criminality assigned becomes really critical. But all across, the competency of these systems is always in question. Like, there's a whole lot of bullshit and show and tell and drama and sensationalism that is presented with that too. It's like flying cars back in the 1960s. So again, like, yes, we do have cell phones and where we could doing that. So I'm sorry, long way to ask that question, that, what has been your understanding of just even the competency level of these systems?
Yeah, I think one thing that we notice over time, at least after the fall of the predpol predictive policing algorithms that we were criticizing before, is that they're definitely centering the language of artificial intelligence less. That's still there. Like, if you go into the documents, there's still an advertising point about like machine learning analytics, but that's not really the central point anymore, because they know that there's general like public skepticism towards it. Now, generally, they're just focusing more on like making informed decisions, pulling in relevant information, things like that. There's still, algorithms involved, right, and recommending the content to them. I think the part that isn't, bullshit, the part that isn't smokes and mirrors is like just how pervasive this is. And of course, that's like a trope of like all surveillance, is that it's absolutely everywhere. But it's one thing for surveillance to be everywhere, and then another thing for them to be able to connect the dots in so many different ways. And, it is very true that there's going to be many times where there are false positives, right? False positives meaning people identified with a crime that weren't actually identified with it. But even beyond that, this radically increases the opportunities to find crimes, of course, like particular types of crimes in places that are already surveilled, and then radically enhances the ability to ensure criminalization of these people. And then also to basically keep them in the system, like literally keep them in the system, so that there's really like no escaping from it, right? And you have to wonder what it's like to live, and like how it's even possible to begin to have a life like away from these things that are criminalized, when your entire life is under surveillance like this in the first place. And this is something that you see, already in Chinese surveillance systems. And we don't want to say that in China specifically, surveillance is so much worse or anything. Both of these systems are used in, here in our context and in China. They're both very powerful. But that's one thing that they're really effective at doing, being really advanced at, is just following basically every detail of somebody's life. So anytime they want to be like politically active, there's like points put on their like profile. Anytime they move anywhere, there's points put on their profile. And it gives the opportunity to make any type of behavior potentially an aspect of like criminalization. So, I could be doing something, not illegal right now by like going to some particular place, but in retrospect, that information could be used to criminalize me. So it just gives the opportunity to make everything potentially criminalizable. Yeah.
I think Ray has a question, Peter.
Thanks, Peter, for your work. Awesome work. and of course, scary, scary capabilities. My question is, you mentioned sort of in the wonderful list of its capabilities, you mentioned that people who get caught within this database or within this technological infrastructure of power, that they cannot get out. But is there any hope for any kind of data audit? In other words, if I'm in a database, which I am, unfortunately, and is there a way for me to, or somebody to find out to what extent and what information is available is on those databases and in that system? You know, if I go to my doctor, I have the right somehow to look at my medical record. I'm not sure if I can see the whole medical record. I think I can. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the laws are and stuff. But you know, dealing with database criminality, I'm wondering if anything like that has been brought up or at any stage. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And the thing is that there really is that ability to do that, especially through, for example, public records requests. And one selling point of the system is that they can automate this process of giving out public records or like making records public faster. So, you know, you could go to this system and request specific kind of information, and then this could, you know, run a query, run a search, and then bring up all that information. Somebody could check it and then give it to you. So it is trying to make that process more efficient also, as like a selling point, you know. So definitely one of the selling points for a system this pervasive and expansive is, oh, actually this data can be more transparent, right? Actually, you can access this data if you need to. Of course, you know, it's also the real reason is so that the police have more transparency for themselves so that they can access this data, and also so that they can kind of like avoid liability, right? So yeah, there is definitely that possibility. But then, yeah, we just also have to, we also have to think about how, you know, if this practice was widespread of requesting this information, then they wouldn't really allow it. The reason that they can get away with it now is because, you know, it requires a certain level of like being informed, like a certain amount of literacy to even want to get that data in the first place. Yeah. Hopefully that answered the question.
Quick question that I have, Peter. I'm so sorry, unless if somebody else has their hand up. So what is our plan to kind of just bring this conversation to the broader community and maybe popularize this thing about RMS and this stuff? Is there things in the works?
So I think the first thing is, you know, looking at all these different elements that are being brought together, all the different databases, all the different points of data collection, and showing how, you know, these aspects of our lives that are normally thought of as not political, these aspects of our lives that are normally thought of as not having anything to do with criminalization, are being implicated in criminal networks. And that's the first thing. And that's like a matter of, you know, looking at what's a part of the system, but also making it, you know, clear what are the types of places, systems that are involved in this, and giving them like visuals to make them a little bit more familiar. Other than that, I think, you know, as we've talked about, you know, refining these points for like why we have an issue with this. So I think one thing that we haven't looked at too much is really this, you know, this selling point of the Internet of Things, of connecting these different devices together, which of course the 5G internet infrastructure is like a really important part of that. One of the huge reasons that can get taken off the ground is because it is advertised for helping these Internet of Things technologies. So yeah, thinking about how much is being invested into these systems for constructing these crime narratives, and why that matters to us. Yeah. Any other thoughts from people?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks so much for sharing all of that, Peter. We love talking with you about the RMS because I think, speaking for myself, it does feel like something that is just a huge, a huge technology, and also is usually like with a lot of this technology, usually kind of talked about in a way that is made to make it seem like it's very benign, and it's just super helpful to kind of see these visualizations and learn more about like what that actually is and what is like what are all those entry points and the way that that information is shared and the way that it's being used, and it's obviously so much more than what it's made out to be. So yeah, that was really helpful, and also encourage folks. I think that we do have a records management system working group. Am I correct, folks? Yeah, and I think we're meeting this week, right? Or yeah,
Friday, yeah.
I was like, can we be more specific? We are meeting on Friday.
Friday at
And folks are welcome to join that working group.
12 p.m.
And also please contact us just for more information or to plug into any of these working groups.
It's Friday at 12 o'clock. Oh, there it is. Thanks, Peter.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you. Right on. Okay, so it's 7:30, and so for the last part of the evening, we did want to start a conversation with folks. We're glad to have. I'll be passing it over to Akil to facilitate that, but just to be starting a conversation with folks around the fact that Roe versus Wade was just overturned. What are the implications of this? And to be thinking about this as well in terms of what does this mean in the context of the stalker state and the way that people are surveilled? What are some of the things that we can be anticipating? What is our contribution to the conversation? So excited for us to be thinking and talking about that as well. Akil.
Hi, everyone. I'm Akil, part of Stop LAPD Spying as well, and I use he, him pronouns. Thanks, Tiff. So, I mean, I basically think that what I would like to do, if possible, is, brainstorm together a few questions that we could collectively discuss. But first, before that, I was just wondering, this is such a devastating and horrific thing to happen, and just wondering, inviting people if they want to share any emotions they're feeling, if they would like to share, and also no need to if you don't want to share. But if there's things that you're feeling that you like to, and I think that people should be able to unmute right now, right, Hamid? Cool. So. You can also do that as we go through the discussion too. It doesn't have to be right now. I'll give it a couple more moments. Yeah, that's right. Matios is saying in the chat, feel free to type in the chat if you don't feel like unmuting as well. Would it help if we also turned off the recording at this point for the discussion, or would you prefer to keep the recording?
I'm fine with it being turned off. Yeah, I don't have any objection to that. I'm certainly not also the one in charge of that.
No, we should. I just wanted to see if folks. Okay, cool. So there's enough thumbs up. We'll just stop it. Yes.